It is now commonplace that the balance of power or the distribution of power in the world is changing, and that the hegemonic period of the Western Alliance, Europe and the United States, is coming to an end. Asia is roaming economically. China has, in 40 years, moved from being just 1 or 1.5% of the world economy to being 15-16% of the world economy. And with that kind of economic power, obviously, they will also have much more of a say, or they will want to have much more of a say geopolitically in the world, if not in the world yet, definitely in Asia. And they're trying to build the infrastructure for that through both their policies and their so-called Road and Belt Initiative. The West itself has been in a continuous crisis perhaps since 2008, and that is despite the fact that after 1989 it was declared that the Western model has won over the alternatives, and that the world's future was going to be determined by the success or failure of countries to actually adhere to that model. That has come to an end, and in fact we now talk about the decline of the Western liberal international order. The Western economies have not yet recovered from the economic crisis that had hit them in 2008, and they have to readjust themselves to the new realities of power in the world. And not only that, we're also seeing in the United States a radicalization or a radical departure from previously well-established American norms in foreign policy making, with President Trump, who obviously represents an important figure in the wave of populist leaderships around the world, is drastically changing the relations the United States has with the world. On Europe, he has continued, but he has done so much more radically than his predecessors, the gradual retreat of the United States from Europe. And that is not yet satisfying for him. He's also trying to divide the European Union. He does not like the European Union, in my judgment, both because of what the European Union still says it stands for, a liberal democratic order with care for human rights and all that. And second, because probably he doesn't want in the continent an entity that could be at some point actually a competitor to the United States. As I said, the retrenchment or the retreat from Europe by the United States has begun before him, but he's taking it a few steps forward, and he is treating allies as if they were either enemies or subordinates, and in a with a very foul language. Then he has also taken the mantle of anti-Chinese politics, in the sense that he basically articulated what many people were beginning to think, that China had a free ride on the world economic system, on globalization, on the liberal rules of the world economic system for far too long, and has taken advantage of advanced countries' markets and stuff. They have been spying on technology, and they've been moving forward in that sense. So he has decided that it was time to actually hit China economically and pursue the policy of raising tariffs on Chinese goods. The positive results of which are in doubt, but nonetheless, he has managed to establish China as the number one strategic target of the United States, and he created a new consensus about what the American foreign and security policy ought to be geared towards. So in that new world now, with disengagement of the United States from Europe, new geopolitical games, since the United States is also leaving the Middle East actually pretty rapidly, Turkey finds itself in a position to make a lot of choices. It has rather foul relations with its allies, whether they be in Europe and the United States. It's been a long time since Turkey has actually adhered to the principles and values of the European Union, the so-called Copenhagen criteria, in terms of judicial independence, respect for human rights, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and all the rest. And particularly in the wake of the botched coup attempt, when both the Turkish officialdom and the Turkish public were extremely disappointed by the lack of reaction or appropriate reaction from Western allies, has gotten closer and closer to Russia. Russia has obviously an interest in putting a wedge between Turkey and the United States, or the Atlantic Alliance in particular, and they played this game in Syria in spite of the fact that Russia and Turkey have very different objectives, or at least their declared objectives are very different from one another inside Syria. So the logic or the course of the events have brought Turkey to a position whereby its identity as a member of the strategic community that is the West is being questioned. It is being questioned not just outside of Turkey, but it is also being questioned domestically inside Turkey. Elites and the public both demand whether or not Turkey should remain in the Western alliance, or whether it would be better to go ahead and do with Russia. And this is the critical juncture we find ourselves in. And in the next few months, I suppose we will also get an answer as to what the choice is going to be.